The billionaire's dog played with a child, who turned out to be his son. If you believe that fate only knocks once, watch what happens when a golden retriever runs ahead of his billionaire owner and changes 3 lives forever. Stay until the end, because the smallest mistake may turn into the beginning of a miracle. Now, let us return to our main character. The wind of a late October afternoon moved through Central Park like a soft sigh. The sun hung low behind the skyline, painting the grass in copper and gold. Garrick Ellington held the leather leash loosely in one hand, distracted by the hum of distant traffic and the steady rhythm of his own thoughts. Max, his golden retriever, trotted ahead, tail wagging, nose pressed to the ground. Garrick admired the animal's energy. It was the only heartbeat he trusted completely. Max suddenly stopped, ears lifting. Before Garrick could react, the dog bolted toward the playground. The leash slipped from his hand. "Max, heel!" he called, but the command broke into the sound of a child's startled cry. A small boy, no more than 5, stumbled backward, dropping the bread he had been feeding to the pigeons. The dog reached him, sniffed once, then sat down and gently licked the boy's hand. The boy blinked, first in fear, then in laughter. "He is not scary," he said softly, stroking the golden fur. The pigeons scattered into the amber light. Garrick hurried over, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. "I am so sorry," he said, bending slightly. "He never does that." A woman's voice came from behind the child. "Leo, are you all right?" The name froze Garrick for a second, but it was the voice that truly stopped his breath. When she stepped into the sunlight, he felt time fold back on itself. Her dark hair, long to her waist, moved in the wind like a memory. Emilia Cortez. For a heartbeat, the park went silent, except for the ticking of a bicycle wheel passing by. She crouched beside the boy, checking his hands, her tone calm but guarded. "It is all right, sweetheart. The dog was just saying hello." She looked up at Garrick then, and the years between them dissolved into a heavy stillness. Garrick managed a small nod. He is usually better behaved. Emilia's lips curved into a polite, unreadable smile. "It happens." She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. The boy's small wrist turned, and Garrick noticed the thin leather bracelet there, brown, hand-carved, with 2 letters pressed into it, EC. The detail struck him harder than it should have. "That is a nice bracelet," he said, trying to sound casual. "His mother made it," she replied quickly. "Come on, Leo. We have to go." The boy waved at Max. "Goodbye, dog." Max barked once, as if answering. Garrick wanted to speak, to say something that could bridge 6 lost years, but the moment closed. Emilia took the boy's hand and walked away, her silhouette framed by falling leaves. He stood there long after they disappeared into the crowd, the leash still dangling from his fingers. Max nudged his leg, waiting. Garrick stared at the empty path, at the place where the woman he once loved had vanished, and at the memory of a small boy's eyes, gray, unmistakably gray, the same storm color he saw every morning in his own mirror. For the first time in a long while, Garrick Ellington felt the world tilt beneath his certainty. And somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of control and logic, a single question began to whisper. What if that boy was mine? Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us continue the story. That night, the lights of Manhattan stretched beneath Garrick Ellington's penthouse like a sea of restless stars. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glowed, but he felt no warmth in it. The echo of a small voice, "Goodbye, dog," kept looping through his mind. He poured a glass of water and leaned against the marble counter. Max lay curled near the fireplace, tail twitching in half-sleep. Garrick watched the flames dance and thought of the woman in the park, of the curve of her hand brushing dust from her son's sleeve. Her son. He opened a drawer in the study and took out an old envelope. The edges were soft, the ink faded. "If you still choose power over love, do not look for me again." 6 years had passed since Emilia left this letter on his desk. He had told himself that she was better off, that they wanted different things. But seeing her again had cracked the armor he had built around that decision. A phone vibrated on the desk, an email reminder from his assistant. Ellington Foundation Gala, 6 p.m. tomorrow. Garrick ignored it. For the first time, business felt distant, like another man's life. He sat down and opened his laptop. Curiosity blurred into something heavier as he typed the name Emilia Cortez into the search bar. There were few results. One was a feature from a local community paper. Art teacher revives creativity program for underprivileged children. The photo made his chest tighten. Emilia stood in front of a painted wall, surrounded by kids holding paper flowers. Her smile was gentle, the same as before, but her eyes carried a fatigue he had never noticed years ago. The article mentioned a 5-year-old named Leo, her little helper who inspired many of her drawings. Garrick stared at that line for a long time. He scrolled again. One picture showed the boy holding a small wooden pallet. His hair was dark, his smile bright, but those gray eyes, they belonged to no one else but him. He closed the laptop slowly. "Max," he murmured, "what if I made the biggest mistake of my life?" The dog lifted his head as if he could understand. The next morning, Garrick tried to lose himself in work. The boardroom buzzed with numbers and projections, but the words blurred. Every chart looked like a window he could not open. He dismissed the meeting early and drove aimlessly through the city until he found himself parked outside a small brick building. Through the windows he could see paintings lined across the walls, bright colors, children's drawings, and in the center, Emilia, bending to tie a child's shoe. He did not get out. He only watched from the car, feeling something strange rise inside him, a mixture of pride, regret, and fear. She was still creating beauty from nothing, still giving without expecting anything in return. When she finally turned toward the window, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Garrick felt his pulse stumble. She looked startled, then confused. He realized how absurd he must appear, sitting there like a ghost from another life. He started the engine and drove away before she could reach the door. That night, he could not sleep. The image of the boy's wristband, the carved letters EC, replayed over and over. Was it possible? 6 years ago, their breakup had been final, or so he believed. Yet the timing, the resemblance, the look in her eyes when she saw him, it all lined up like quiet proof. He rose from bed and crossed to the window. The city shimmered below, indifferent and vast. Garrick whispered to his reflection, "If he is mine, I need to know." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, faint and silent. Max pressed his nose to the glass, watching flakes drift down. Somewhere in that same city, Emilia Cortez was probably tucking her son into bed, unaware that the man who once broke her heart had finally realized what he might have lost more than love, maybe an entire piece of himself. The following morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of day when the air felt thin enough to sharpen every thought. Garrick Ellington woke early, restless. He had spent half the night arguing with himself about what he had seen, what he had felt, and what logic tried to deny. Yet logic had already lost. He needed to know the truth. He sat at his desk, sunlight sliding over the stack of unread files, and stared at the single object in front of him, a small wooden wristband. It had been left behind when Max tugged at the boy's sleeve the day before. Garrick had found it in the grass after they left, the carved letters faint but unmistakable. EC. He had told himself he only picked it up to return it, but the moment he held it, something inside him shifted. Garrick called the head of the Ellington Foundation's health division, a trusted friend named Dr. Kaplan. His voice was calm, deliberate. "I need a confidential DNA test run. 2 samples only. Mine and this." He did not explain further, and Kaplan did not ask. The man owed him enough favors to understand silence. Garrick hung up and placed the wristband inside a sealed envelope. The next hours crawled by. Meetings blurred together, voices drowned in a single, pulsing thought. When Kaplan called that evening, Garrick's hand trembled slightly as he picked up. "The results are ready," the doctor said. There was a pause, then a quiet exhale. 99.7% probability. The child is your biological son. For a long moment, Garrick could not speak. The words landed with a strange gentleness, as if the universe had whispered a confession it had hidden for years. He finally said, "Thank you," and ended the call. He walked to the balcony, cold wind brushing his face. Below, the city moved in its endless rhythm, unaware that his entire world had just changed. He had a son, a boy who laughed in the park, who wore a bracelet carved by his mother, who looked at his dog with the same curiosity Garrick once had as a child. Max trotted out to the balcony, pressing against his leg. Garrick sank to one knee and stroked the dog's fur. "She never told me," he said softly. "She raised him alone all this time." His throat tightened. He realized how much courage it must have taken for Emilia to face everything without him. That evening, he drove to the address listed in the newspaper article, the small art center where Emilia taught. Through the window, he saw her tidying up after class, her long hair tied back loosely. The children waved goodbye and left in a cheerful rush. When the last one disappeared, Garrick stepped out of the car and crossed the street. She looked up as he entered, her expression shifting from surprise to guarded calm. "Garrick." "Emilia," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." "I do not think we do." She turned back to the easels, stacking brushes into a tin cup. He moved closer. "You should have told me about him." Her hand froze midair, then fell to her side. "Told you?" she repeated, incredulous. "You chose your company over me. You let your father's contract end our engagement. What would have changed if I had told you?" "Everything," he said. "I would have stayed." She laughed, but it was brittle. "You say that now, when it costs you nothing." He reached into his coat and placed the wristband on the table. This fell in the park. Her eyes widened. She picked it up gently, fingers trembling. "You kept it." "I had to know," he admitted. "I ran a test." Her head lifted sharply. "You what?" "I needed the truth. Emilia, he is my son." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Outside, the winter light dimmed, washing the room in gray. She closed her eyes, and when she spoke again, her voice was tired rather than angry. "You had 6 years to ask the truth, Garrick. I am not sure what you are looking for now, redemption, or a role to play in a life you once refused to share." "Lutton?" He wanted to answer, but she had already turned away. Through the window, the last streak of sunlight touched the corner of a child's painting, a man, a woman, and a golden dog, beneath a paper sundae. Garrick stared at it, realizing the artist's name written in a child's hand, Leo Cortez. He whispered to himself, "My son." But Emilia did not turn back. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic drip of paint water into the sink, counting down the seconds between the man he had been and the father he still hoped to become. The days that followed moved like slow rain, quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore. Garrick Ellington could not erase the sound of Emilia's voice or the look in her eyes when he said the words, "He is my son." That sentence had opened the truth, but it had also reopened every wound between them. He went through his usual motions, morning meetings, foundation calls, evening dinners with clients, yet everything felt weightless, like he was moving inside glass. His colleagues noticed the distance in him, but no one dared to ask. At night, the city lights no longer impressed him. They only reminded him of all the time he had spent chasing things that could not love him back. One afternoon, while reviewing reports at his office, Garrick received an email invitation that caught his attention. Community art fundraiser, featuring the works of local children and their mentor, Emilia Cortez. The address was the same small brick center he had visited before. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then clicked accept. That Saturday, he arrived alone. The building buzzed with warmth that the polished galas of his world never had. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, painted by tiny hands. The scent of acrylic and lemon-scented cleaner filled the air. Parents laughed, children darted between easels, and in the center stood Emilia, her long hair braided loosely, her expression calm but radiant as she guided the children through their display. When she noticed him near the doorway, her smile faded into surprise. For a second, neither spoke. Then a child tugged her sleeve, showing a smudge on his painting. She bent down to help, pretending not to see Garrick watching. A small voice suddenly piped up beside him. "Hi, sir. You are Max's friend." Garrick looked down. Leo stood there, holding a paper cup of juice, his cheeks pink from excitement. "Yes, I am," Garrick said softly. "He misses you." "Can I see him again?" the boy asked, eyes bright. Before Garrick could answer, Emilia appeared behind her son, her tone measured. "Leo, go help Mrs. Ruth with the brushes, please." "Them." Leo nodded and ran off, waving his juice cup. Emilia faced Garrick. "Why are you here?" He met her gaze. "Because I needed to see both of you." She folded her arms. "You already did that. You got your answer." "I did," he said, "but knowing the truth is not enough. I cannot pretend this never happened." Her eyes flickered with emotion, quickly buried. "You have your company, your fortune, your image. We have our lives. Please, do not mix them again." "I am not here for an image, Emilia. I am here for a chance." She hesitated. Around them, music played from a small speaker, a recording of children singing about sunshine and home. Garrick's voice dropped. Let me help. The center could use funding. The kids deserve better supplies. Let me do this at least. Her expression softened, but only slightly. You think money will fix everything? No, he said quietly. But maybe it can build something that does not break. Lago. She studied him for a long time, searching for the arrogance she remembered. Instead, she found weariness. He looked older, not in face but in spirit. Fine, she said finally. You can contribute, but it will go through the board like any donation. That is all I ask. Before leaving, Garrick knelt to speak to Leo once more. Keep painting, buddy. You are really good at it. Leo grinned. Mom says I paint like Grandpa. Garrick smiled faintly, hiding the sting that word left behind. Then you must be very talented. Outside, the evening had turned cool. As he stepped to his car, he saw the reflection of Emilia through the window, guiding her son's small hands over a canvas. A lamp glowed above them, soft and golden. Driving home, Garrick made a silent promise. He would not force himself into their lives. He would prove through actions, not arguments, that he could be the man she once believed he might become. Back in the penthouse, he sat beside Max and opened his laptop. He began drafting a new project proposal and initiative under the Ellington Foundation to support single parents and children through art and education. He typed the first line slowly, carefully, as if it were a vow. Every child deserves a safe space to create, and every parent deserves the strength to stay. When he finished, he closed the computer. For the first time in years, Garrick felt purpose that had nothing to do with profit. And though Emilia's forgiveness was still a distant horizon, he had finally started walking toward it. The following week unfolded with a kind of quiet anticipation that Garrick Ellington had never experienced before. For years, his life had been measured in contracts and deadlines, but now every day was measured in small, personal steps. He no longer asked himself why he cared. He only wondered how to prove that he truly did. He began visiting the art center under the pretense of helping with logistics for the new foundation program. Emilia had agreed to collaborate, though their conversations remained formal. Still, Garrick noticed small changes. Her tone had softened, her guard lowered slightly. She no longer turned away immediately when he entered a room. One Tuesday afternoon, he arrived early to deliver new art supplies, paints, brushes, and fresh canvases ordered under the new fund. Children's laughter echoed from the next room. He paused in the doorway, watching Emilia help Leo hang his painting. The boy's fingers were smudged with blue, his face glowing with pride. "Mom, look!" Leo pointed at the canvas. It showed a golden dog standing beside a tall man and a woman under a bright orange sundae. "That is Max, and that is you and me." "Dest." Emilia smiled. "It is beautiful, honey. You captured his fur perfectly." When she turned and saw Garrick, the smile faltered, but she did not hide it. "You did not have to bring all this yourself," she said. "I wanted to see the place with life in it," he replied. "It feels different from the world I am used to." He helped her arrange the boxes. Their hands brushed once over a roll of canvas, and both went still. The silence was full but not uncomfortable. Later, when the children had gone, Emilia stayed behind to clean the brushes. Garrick lingered by the door. "Emilia," he said softly. "About Leo, does he know anything about me?" She shook her head. "No, he knows his father died before he was born. It was easier that way." "Do you really believe that?" Her eyes lifted to his. "I believe that absence hurts less when it has no name." The truth of it struck him hard. "Then let me change that," he said. "Let me be present, even if it takes time." Emilia sighed, the kind of sigh that carried years of exhaustion and doubt. "You cannot just walk back into our lives and rewrite the past." "I know," he said quietly, "but I can start writing the future differently." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. "We will see." Over the next few weeks, Garrick kept showing up not with money, but with time. He helped paint walls, repaired a broken shelf, even read stories to the children during art breaks. He never forced himself into Emilia's private space. He simply stayed near, steady and patient. One rainy afternoon, Leo ran across the hall, slipping on the wet floor. Garrick caught him before he fell. "Careful, buddy," he said, steadying him. Leo laughed, unbothered. "You are strong, Mr. Garrick." Although Emilia, standing nearby, saw the scene and felt something shift inside her, a quiet recognition that this man, once a stranger to compassion, was changing in ways she could not ignore. That evening, after the center closed, she found Garrick outside by his car. "You have been here every day," she said. "You do not owe me anything." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I owe myself the chance to be someone Leo could look up to." She hesitated. "He already does." Lo! The rain eased into mist, and for a moment they stood in silence, watching water bead along the car hood. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "we are hosting a small open house for the parents. You should come. It might help the foundation to see how far we have come." "I will be there," he said. When he drove away, the city lights reflected in the wet pavement like 1,000 small promises. For the first time in years, Garrick Ellington did not feel like a man haunted by what he lost. He felt like a man on the verge of earning something real. Back inside, Emilia turned off the last light in the art room. The painting Leo had made earlier of the man, the woman, and the dog gleamed softly in the lamplight. She touched the edge of the canvas and whispered to herself, "Maybe people really can change." And outside, beneath the fading rain, Max barked once from the back seat of Garrick's car, as if agreeing. The open house arrived on a crisp Friday afternoon, with autumn light spilling through the tall windows of the community art center. Colorful banners painted by the children hung above the doorway. Parents filled the hall, admiring the drawings pinned along the walls. It was not a grand gala or a luxurious event, but to Emilia Cortez, it felt more important than anything she had done in years. Garrick Ellington stood near the entrance, dressed simply in a dark sweater and jeans. He had left his expensive suit behind, knowing this was not a boardroom. This was her world, and he wanted to step into it honestly. Max waited quietly in the car outside, as if understanding his presence might cause too much attention. When Emilia saw Garrick speaking politely with parents, thanking them for supporting the center, she felt a mixture of surprise and unease. He moved with the calm confidence of a leader, yet without the pride that once made him unreachable. Leo spotted him first and ran across the room holding up a painting. "Mr. Garrick, look, I drew Max chasing a butterfly." Garrick knelt, admiring the bright yellow and green swirls. "That is perfect," he said. "You even got his tail right." Emilia joined them, smiling at her son's excitement. "You have been practicing," she told Leo. Leo nodded. "Mr. Garrick helped me mix the colors last week." Her eyes flicked to Garrick. He did not boast. He only smiled at the child. "He has an artist's eye," Garrick said softly. As the evening unfolded, the room filled with laughter, applause, and the sound of small hands clapping for their friends. Garrick stayed by Emilia's side when people came to thank the foundation for its support. For once, the attention did not center on him, but on the children whose lives had changed. Near the end of the event, a sudden crash echoed from the back hallway. The sound of splintering glass sent a chill through the room. Emilia hurried toward it, with Garrick close behind. They found Leo standing near a fallen ladder, his small hand cut from where a broken frame had landed. Blood trickled down his wrist. Emilia's face turned pale. "Leo!" She lifted him quickly, pressing a napkin against the wound. The boy whimpered but tried not to cry. "Let me help," Garrick said, his voice steady. He removed his jacket, wrapped it carefully around the child's arm, and pressed down to stop the bleeding. "We need to take him to the hospital." Emilia hesitated for only a second before nodding. "My car is parked outside." "I will drive," Garrick said firmly. "You stay with him." The drive to Westbridge Hospital felt endless. Leo's breathing was shallow, his face pale, but he clung to his mother's hand. Garrick focused on the road, jaw tight, heart hammering with fear he had never felt before. When they arrived, he carried the boy inside himself, ignoring the startled looks from the staff. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, recognizing Garrick but saying nothing. Emilia followed, her voice shaking as she explained the accident. After what felt like hours, a nurse came out with a calm smile. The cut was clean, a few stitches and he will be fine. Relief hit them both at once. Emilia sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. Garrick sat beside her in silence. The tension between them dissolved in that quiet hallway filled with antiseptic air and distant monitors. "He could have been seriously hurt," she whispered. "He was brave," Garrick said. "So were you." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw the fear still hiding behind his composed expression. "You were terrified," she said softly. "I have never been more afraid in my life," he admitted. They sat together in silence until the nurse returned, leading Leo out with a small bandage on his wrist. "It barely hurts," the boy said proudly. Emilia laughed through her tears. You are very brave, my love. Garrick knelt beside him. You scared us, champ. No more climbing ladders, all right? Leo nodded solemnly. Okay. Can Max come visit me when I get home? Garrick smiled. I think Max would love that. As they left the hospital, the city lights shimmered through the night rain. Garrick opened the car door for them, then paused before starting the engine. Emilia's hand rested lightly on her son's knee. In that moment, Garrick felt something shift inside him again, a fragile bridge forming where bitterness once stood. The storm between them had quieted, replaced by something gentler, something that could finally begin to heal. The morning after the hospital visit, the city felt calmer, washed clean by rain. Sunlight glimmered through thin clouds as Garrick Ellington stood outside the art center, waiting. His car was parked by the curb, Max sitting quietly in the back seat, tail thumping against the leather. Emilia Cortez arrived with Leo, the boy's wrist wrapped neatly in a fresh bandage. She looked tired, but peaceful. Leo spotted Max and squealed, "He came!" The golden retriever barked once, excitement bright in his eyes. Garrick opened the door and let the dog out. Max bounded forward, licking Leo's hand with gentle care, as if checking that his small friend was truly safe. Emilia smiled at the sight. He has not stopped talking about Max all morning, she said. I promised him a visit, Garrick replied. I try to keep my promises these days. She nodded, a faint warmth crossing her face. They stood there in silence, watching Leo toss a ball for Max. The laughter echoing between them sounded like the beginning of something they both thought they had lost forever. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything yesterday. Laban. You do not have to thank me, he answered. He is my son. I should have been there all along. Emilia's eyes softened, but caution remained in her tone. Being there once is easy. Staying is harder. I know, he said. Let me prove I can stay. The weeks that followed moved like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. Garrick kept coming to the center, but not as the man who owned it. He came as a father. He read to the children, painted with Leo, and helped Emilia finish the paperwork for the new program. Slowly, the walls between them began to lower. One late afternoon, Emilia found him repairing a loose window latch in the studio. You do not have to fix everything, she teased. He looked up with a small smile. Some things deserve to be held together. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You really have changed. I had to, he said. The old version of me lost you. Yes, we can. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Emilia locked the doors to the art center. Garrick waited by the car, Max sitting beside him. The street glowed gold under the fading light. Tomorrow is a big day, he said. Yes, she agreed. And for the first time, it feels like the start of something good. As she walked away with Leo, Garrick watched them, his heart steady. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a man chasing redemption. He felt like a man who had finally found home. The day of the gala arrived beneath a clear, late-autumn sky. The Ellington Foundation Hall glowed with warm light, its glass walls reflecting the city like a sea of gold. Inside, guests moved among displays of children's artwork, bright strokes of color and hope arranged along the walls. At the center of the room stood the largest painting of all, Golden in the Rain, the same piece Emilia had created years ago. Tonight it hung framed and radiant, illuminated for everyone to see. Garrick Ellington stood near the stage, adjusting his tie. For once, he did not feel the weight of status or expectation. He felt nervous, human. Max waited backstage with an assistant, wearing a small blue ribbon that matched Leo's. The boy clutched his mother's hand, eyes wide at the shimmering crowd. Are you ready? Garrick asked gently. Leo nodded. Mom said this is for everyone who does not have a home yet. Timning. Emilia smiled. That is right, sweetheart. Her gaze met Garrick's for a brief moment. It carried gratitude, forgiveness, and a quiet pride that reached deeper than words. When the music faded and the lights dimmed, Garrick stepped forward to the microphone. The crowd hushed. His voice carried not the tone of a businessman, but of a man finally speaking from his heart. Good evening. 6 years ago, I believed success meant standing alone. I was wrong. This foundation began as an idea, but it became something real because of one woman's courage and one child's laughter. The audience listened closely. Emilia watched, her hands clasped. I want to dedicate tonight to those who remind us that love is an action, not a possession, Garrick continued. And to the people who taught me that lesson, Emilia Cortez, and her son, Leo. A murmur spread through the room. Garrick turned and gestured toward them. Emilia hesitated, then stepped forward with Leo at her side. The spotlight touched them both. Leo grinned shyly and waved. "This program," Garrick said, "is called Leo's Light. It will provide grants for single parents and art centers like this one across the city. Every child deserves a safe place to create, and every parent deserves the strength to stay." Applause rose like a wave. Cameras flashed, but for Garrick, the world narrowed to a single image, Emilia's face softening into a smile, tears glinting in her eyes. He lowered his voice, speaking not to the crowd now but to her. "You once told me that absence hurts less when it has no name. I hope tonight we give it one family." The room erupted again. Emilia reached for Leo, lifting him into her arms. The boy whispered in her ear, then turned toward Garrick. "Mom said you did something very brave." Garrick smiled. "Maybe. But real bravery belongs to both of you." As the event closed, music swelled, lights dimmed, and people began to dance. Garrick offered Emilia his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his. Together they swayed slowly under the soft glow of chandeliers while Leo laughed nearby with Max. For the first time there were no barriers, no secrets, only truth. In that moment, Garrick Ellington understood that redemption did not come from speeches or applause. It came from choosing, every single day, to love and to stay. The morning after the gala dawned soft and golden. Central Park shimmered under the pale light of early winter, its trees nearly bare, their last leaves turning like slow embers in the breeze. Garrick Ellington walked along the familiar path with Max trotting at his side, the leash loose in his hand. Ahead of him, Emilia and Leo waited near the same bench where their story had begun. Leo was feeding breadcrumbs to the pigeons again, giggling as they fluttered around his shoes. Emilia watched him, her long hair catching the wind. She turned as Garrick approached, smiling in a quiet way that no longer carried hesitation. "You are late," she teased softly. "Traffic," he replied, smiling back. And Max insisted on stopping for every squirrel. She laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight itself. "Some things never change. Maybe that is a good thing," he said. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Leo chase a pigeon across the grass. When he stumbled, Garrick stepped forward instinctively, but the boy caught his balance and waved proudly. "I am fine." Emilia's gaze lingered on her son. "He is stronger than I thought," she said. "He gets that from you," Garrick answered. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both the past and something new, something steady. "He gets his stubbornness from you," she said, her voice warm. Garrick reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside lay a simple leather bracelet, identical to Leo's but carved with 3 letters. E+G+L. He held it out to her. "I thought we could match." Her fingers brushed the leather. "E-G-L? Emilia, Garrick, and Leo," he said quietly. "A reminder of where we started and where we are going." She looked at the bracelet, then at him. "Are you sure you are ready for this for us?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "I have been ready for a long time. I just had to learn what it meant to stay." She fastened the bracelet around her wrist, eyes glistening. "Then stay," she whispered. Leo ran back, breathless and laughing. "Mom! Mr. Garrick! Max found my old ball." Garrick lifted him easily, spinning him once. "You mean our old ball, partner?" Emilia laughed, and for a moment all 3 of them stood together beneath the pale sunlight, man, woman, child, and the loyal dog who had begun it all. The park around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the city itself understood that something lost had finally been found. Garrick looked at Emilia and said softly, "6 years ago, I thought love was a distraction. Now I know it is the only thing worth fighting for." She reached up, touching his face. "Welcome home," she said. Max barked once, the sound bright and certain. Garrick took Emilia's hand, Leo's smaller one resting between theirs, and together they began to walk down the path toward the sunlight. The camera of life pulled back, capturing them as 3 silhouettes framed by golden trees. The wind carried the last words of their story. Love is not perfection, it is persistence. And sometimes, even the smallest act